Imagine walking a peaceful beach and finding a sneaker in the sand. You kick it over and realize there's a human foot inside. Now imagine it keeps happening. This is the true story of the severed feet of British Columbia, one of the strangest mysteries in modern history.
What you are about to hear is believed to be real, based on witness accounts, testimonies, and public record. This is terrifying and true.
On the quiet shores of British Columbia, a young girl made a disturbing discovery, one that would ignite headlines around the world. A single sneaker tangled in seaweed, and inside, a human foot. Over the next 15 years, more would follow, foot after foot, each one washing ashore like a message from the deep. No bodies, no suspects, just severed feet and unanswered questions. Was it a natural phenomenon or something far more sinister? Tonight, we dive deep into a mystery that's been haunting the Pacific Northwest right after this. On a clear August afternoon in 2007, a 12-year-old girl wandered along the secluded shore of Jebediah Island, a forested marine park off the coast of British Columbia. The summer air smelled of salt and seaweed as she clambered over driftwood and rocks. Then, something unusual caught her eye. A lone shoe lying tangled in the kelp at the high tide line. It was a blue and white Adidas sneaker, a men's size 12, caked with sand and barnacles. Curious and unsuspecting, the girl picked it up and tugged at the sock protruding from the inside. What she found made her scream. A decayed human foot was still nestled in the shoe's dank interior. In that surreal moment, Jebediah Island's tranquil beauty was pierced by a grotesque discovery. The first of many in a bizarre mystery that would haunt the shores of the Salish Sea for years to come. The authorities were alerted immediately. As waves lapped at the isolated cove and seabirds cried overhead, local police and coroners arrived by boat to retrieve the sneaker and its morbid contents. The foot was male and right-sided, cleanly detached at the ankle as if torn free by nature. No other remains were found nearby. Investigators were baffled. Whose foot was this, and how had it ended up alone on this remote beach? Little did they know, this chilling, cold open scene was only the beginning of a macabre phenomenon. In the months and years that followed, one severed foot after another would mysteriously wash ashore around British Columbia and the neighboring coasts of Washington state, capturing public imagination and spawning countless theories. The puzzle of the Salish Sea severed feet had just begun. In the wake of the Jebediah Island find, what should have been an isolated oddity soon turned into an eerie series of recurring discoveries. 5 more human feet washed up in the region over the next year alone, each instance adding to the growing sense of alarm and intrigue. Police started keeping a tally, and locals developed a morbid superstition. Every time a shoe floated ashore, one dreaded what might be inside. What follows is a chronological chronicle of the key discoveries, including dates, locations, footwear, and identifying details, painting a grim map of the mysteries spread across coastal British Columbia and northwest Washington. August 20th, 2007, Jebediah Island, British Columbia. The case's inaugural find: a right male foot in a size 12 Adidas running shoe, white with blue mesh, was discovered by the visiting girl. Forensic examination later identified the remains as belonging to a missing man from the mainland who had been suffering from depression. Authorities believe the foot disarticulated naturally while underwater through decay, separating at the ankle joint. This detail would prove common to nearly all of the cases. August 26, 2007, Gabriola Island, British Columbia. Just 6 days after the first, a second right foot washed up, discovered by a couple strolling a beach. It was wearing a size 12 white Reebok sneaker. This foot, also male, was waterlogged and appeared to have been carried ashore by currents from the south. Investigators noted that an animal might have dragged it above the tide line. The Reebok model had been produced in 2004 and was sold primarily in North America. Though unidentified at the time, its appearance so soon after the Jebediah foot set the pattern. Another right foot, male, in a floating sneaker. British Columbia's Gulf Islands were suddenly the epicenter of a mystery. February 8th, 2008, Valdez Island, British Columbia. After a quiet winter, the third foot emerged on a beach in the Strait of Georgia. This one was yet another right foot in a men's size 11 Nike running shoe. Through DNA analysis, the British Columbia Coroner's Service later identified it as belonging to a 21-year-old man from the suburb of Surrey who had been missing since 2004. His death was deemed not suspicious, pointing to an accident or suicide. Notably, months later, the matching left foot of this individual would also turn up. The Nike model was sold in early 2003, offering a rough time frame for how long the remains might have been in the water. We are nowhere near the end of this list, a list of anomalies, suddenly all in a line, raising more questions than answers. May 22nd, 2008, Kirkland Island, on the Fraser River Delta, British Columbia. The fourth discovery broke the pattern in several ways. Found on a marshy island in the Fraser River mouth, closer to Vancouver, this was a woman's foot, also right side. It was encased in a blue and white New Balance sneaker with a sock. The shoe had been manufactured in 1999. Because of the river location, investigators suspected it floated down the Fraser River rather than drifting among the islands. Years later, in 2011, this foot was identified via DNA to a woman who had jumped from the Patullo Bridge, which spans the Fraser, in 2004, confirming a suicide origin. This was a pivotal clue. It linked a severed foot to a known victim of self-harm, not foul play, reinforcing a non-homicidal explanation. June 16, 2008, West Ham Island, British Columbia. 2 hikers in Delta, BC, found a left foot floating in the estuary near West Ham Island. DNA tests later matched it to the right foot from Valdez Island, found in February of 2008, confirming they were a pair from the same young Surrey man. This pairing was a breakthrough for investigators. It showed that feet could separate from the same body and wash up months apart on entirely different islands, depending on where the currents carried them. By now, with 5 human feet discovered within a 10-month span, the story had seized international media attention. Newspapers around the world ran headlines about Canada's mystery of the floating feet, and speculation ran rampant about a possible serial killer or other dark scenarios. August 1st, 2008, near Piste, Washington, USA. The 6th find marked the first outside of Canadian waters. On a beach on the Olympic Peninsula, just south of the British Columbia border, a camper stumbled upon a black size 11 Nike sneaker containing a right foot with bones and flesh still inside. It was covered in seaweed and had apparently floated down the Strait of Juan de Fuca. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Clallam County Sheriff noted that this foot had drifted from Canadian waters, given the proximity. Indeed, many observers thought it likely, given the cluster up north. This foot remained unidentified for years. In a testament to advances in forensics, 16 years later, in 2025, investigators used genetic genealogy to finally ID it as belonging to a 17-year-old Canadian boy, Jeff Sertel, who went missing from Mission, British Columbia, in April of 2007. Sertel's fate isn't fully detailed in any public records, but his identification so long after discovery underscored that these feet largely traced back to known missing persons. November 11th, 2008, Richmond, Fraser River, British Columbia. A left foot in a small New Balance shoe was found floating in the Fraser River near Richmond. Forensic DNA later confirmed it was the mate to the Kirkland Island foot, the woman who jumped off the bridge. This gave investigators their second confirmed pair. By the end of 2008, 7 human feet had been found in the region's waterways. Of these, several were now matched into pairs or identified as individuals with no evidence of foul play. The pattern was becoming clear to officials, even as public theories grew wild. The discoveries continued sporadically over the next decade. October 27th, 2009, Richmond, British Columbia. A right foot in a white Nike sneaker men's size 8.5, washed up on a Richmond beach. It was soon identified as a local Vancouver area man who had been missing since January of 2008. August 27th, 2010, Whidbey Island, Washington. A foot, likely a woman or child's right foot, without a shoe or sock, was found on Whidbey Island in Puget Sound. It had been in the water an estimated 2 months. DNA was extracted, but no matching profile was found in any database, leaving this case unresolved to this day. December 5th, 2010, Tacoma, Washington. A boy's size 6 hiking boot containing a juvenile's right foot washed up on tidal flats near Tacoma. This suggested not all victims were adults. Perhaps a younger person drowned or died, and their foot surfaced. Seattle area authorities, like spokesman Mark Fulgham, noted the find was about 225 kilometers, or roughly 140 miles, south of Vancouver, proving the phenomenon was indeed not limited to Canada. August 30th, 2011. False Creek, Vancouver, British Columbia. A men's size 9 running shoe with a foot inside was found floating near a downtown marina. The sex could not be determined from the remains, but notably, the leg bones were attached up to the knee. It had disarticulated at the knee, naturally in the water, a process forensic experts pointed out occurs over time. This was foot number 11, and we're nowhere near done. November 4th, 2011, Sasamat Lake, British Columbia. In an inland twist, campers discovered a right foot in a size 12 hiking boot floating in Sasamat Lake, a freshwater lake near Port Moody. In January of 2012, the British Columbia Coroner's Service identified it as belonging to Stefan Zaharuko, a local fisherman who had gone missing way back in 1987. After 24 years submerged, his remains finally surfaced. The police concluded the foot separated naturally, and that there was no foul play. This was an outlier in time. Most other feet were from more recent deaths, but it reinforced that even decades-old drownings could send a foot to shore under the right circumstances. December 10th, 2011, Lake Union, Seattle, Washington. A somewhat different scenario. A human leg bone with a foot attached was found in a black plastic bag under a bridge in Lake Union. The fact that it was bagged suggested a possible crime, but as of early 2012, Seattle authorities haven't determined cause or identity. This case stands apart from the others, which were all in open water and unbagged, and often isn't counted in the Shoe Found series. January 26, 2012, Vancouver, British Columbia. A passerby's dog uncovered what appeared to be human bones inside a boot along the sand at a beach in Vancouver's Kitsilano area. Little information was ever released on identification. After 2012, the pace of discoveries slowed, but did not halt. May 6, 2014, Seattle, Washington. a left foot in a New Balance sneaker, white with blue trim, men's size 10.5, washed up at Seattle's Centennial Park on Elliott Bay. The shoe model was one first sold in April of 2008, hinting that the foot likely belonged to someone who died after that date. Seattle police, however, did not immediately match it to a missing person in any local files. February 7, 2016. Botanical Beach, Vancouver Island, British Columbia. Hikers on the Wild West coast of Vancouver Island found a foot in a sock and running shoe among the rocks. February 12, 2016, just 5 days later, another foot washed up in the same area near Port Renfrew. The British Columbia Coroner's Service confirmed these were a matching pair, left and right, from one individual. They have not been publicly identified as of this writing, remaining two of the few unmatched feet in the mystery. December 8th, 2017. Jordan River, Vancouver Island, British Columbia. The remains of a leg with a shoe attached were found near the tiny settlement of Jordan River. DNA testing linked it to Stanley K. Okumoto, a 79-year-old man from Washington State who had gone missing a few months earlier in September of 2017. How Okumoto died hasn't been detailed in any press reports, but his age and the location suggested a possible accidental fall or drowning. This identification demonstrated international drift, a Washington man's remains ending up in British Columbian waters. May 6, 2018, Gabriola Island, British Columbia. A man walking along Gabriola Island's shore, the same island where the second foot was found in 2007, discovered a hiking boot with a human foot wedged in a logjam along the high tide line. This became the 15th foot found in British Columbia since 2007. It was later identified and linked to a male missing person, though details were scarce in public reports. September 2018, West Vancouver, British Columbia. A light gray Nike Free RN shoe with a foot inside washed up near the 30th Street beach access in West Vancouver. This shoe, men's size 9.5, had been manufactured in early 2017. Forensic examiners determined the foot likely belonged to a male under 50. Despite DNA analysis, it wasn't matched to any known person at the time. The British Columbia Coroner's Service made a public appeal for help in identifying this foot, showing a photo of the sneaker and noting the blue sock it contained. January 1st, 2019. Everett, Washington. On New Year's Day, beachgoers on Jetty Island in Puget Sound came upon a boot with a human foot inside. U.S. authorities used DNA to identify it as belonging to Antonio Neal, a young man who had been missing from Everett since December of 2016. Neal's death is believed to have been an accident or misadventure. With the recovery of his foot, at least his family gained a sliver of closure. Late 2021, Washington State. 2 more feet surfaced in Washington in November of 2021. A work boot containing a right foot, male via bone analysis, washed up on Locust Beach in Bellingham. The next month, in December of 2021, a size 8 New Balance sneaker with human remains was found at the mouth of the Elwha River near Port Angeles. using advanced DNA techniques in collaboration with forensic genealogy. Investigators identified that foot as belonging to Geraldine L. Smith, a woman from Sequim, Washington, who had been missing since January of 2018. Only one more foot has been found, at least as of the recording of this show, but the story goes much deeper from there. July 23rd, 2023, Victoria, British Columbia. Most recently, a foot washed up on Gonzales Beach in Victoria. This occurred after a relative lull of a couple of years. As of the time of this recording, few details have been released, and the British Columbia Coroner's Service investigation is ongoing. This case shows that even over 15 years later, the Salish Sea's strange trend continues to sporadically appear, reminding locals that the mystery isn't over. In total, at least 21 discrete feet have been found on beaches around the Salish Sea since that fateful day in 2007. The exact count varies slightly by source as definitions differ, but over 20 is most certain. They turned up on rocky islands and quiet coves in major cities and remote inlets, from Vancouver Island's outer coast to inner Puget Sound. The majority were in British Columbia's waters, especially around the Strait of Georgia, east of Vancouver Island, but a significant few were in Washington's Puget Sound as well. Crucially, many came in matching pairs, left and right, from the same person, and by the late 2010s, a large number had been identified via DNA as missing persons. Through it all, no signs of tool marks or deliberate severing were found, only the handiwork of Mother Nature in disarticulating these limbs. But back in the early years of the saga, the public and press didn't have the benefit of hindsight or forensic clarity. The severed feet sparked rampant speculation and urban legends of the most chilling kind. From the start, forensic experts and oceanographers were drawn into the case to answer two pressing questions. How do feet come off a body on their own? And why were so many washing ashore in this particular region? The answers, it turns out, lie in the grisly realities of decomposition, the construction of modern sneakers, and the vagaries of ocean currents. Over years of investigation, scientists methodically pieced together an explanation that, while morbid, is thoroughly rooted in natural processes, one that officials say fully demystifies the severed feet mystery, even if public fascination persists. One key early observation came from the British Columbia Coroner's Service, which by 2017 had a growing database of these cases. They reported that in none of the documented cases was foul play suspected. 8 of the first 12 feet had been identified, correlating to 6 individuals, some with both feet found, and all appeared to have died via accidents or suicide, not homicide. Quote, "In none of the cases was any foul play involved," the coroner's service emphasized. This official stance was based on multiple forensic indicators. No cut marks on bones, no trauma on the feet themselves, apart from natural wear and tear, and known histories of depression or accidents for identified persons. Former British Columbia coroner Barb McClintock explained in 2016, quote, "We pretty well think we know what happened in every case. It's not strange serial killers or funny little aliens. Instead," she said, "there's none that have any suggestion of homicide. In every case, there is an alternative, very reasonable explanation. Those reasonable explanations largely boiled down to people who went missing, either by misadventure, such as boating accidents or falls into the water, or by suicide, whose bodies ended up in the sea." But how exactly do feet detach from those bodies? The idea of feet severing naturally can seem bizarre without understanding the science of decomposition in water. Pathologists and forensic anthropologists clarify that a submerged corpse will eventually come apart at the joints due to normal decay and scavenging. Gail Anderson, a criminal professor and co-director of the SFU's Center for Forensic Research, put it succinctly, quote, "Feet easily disarticulate, and when they are attached to a flotation device such as a running shoe, they are easily washed ashore. In other words, the ankle is a relatively weak link. As soft tissues decay, the foot can separate from the leg without any tool. Marine creatures accelerate this. Quote, Anthropods will skeletonize and disarticulate a body quite quickly depending on oceanic conditions," Anderson noted. Her research included a telling 2016 experiment in which she submerged pig carcasses in the Salish Sea to study decomposition. The results were ghoulish but informative. In the oxygen-rich coastal waters, scavengers like crabs, fish, and other invertebrates can strip a body to bones in less than 4 days. Extremities like hands and feet are often the first to detach as ligaments and tendons rot away. Crucially, modern sneakers played an unexpected but critical role. Around the 1990s and 2000s, athletic shoe design had shifted toward lighter, more buoyant materials. Lots of foam padding, air pockets in soles, and buoyant rubber. This means a foot encased in such a sneaker has its own personal life jacket. It floats to the surface instead of sinking to the seabed. Quote, "You'll notice nobody's washing up with a stiletto or a flip-flop," Anderson pointed out wryly. The footwear in all the cases was sturdy and floatable. Running shoes, hiking boots, never high heels or flimsy sandals. In fact, the British Columbia Coroner's Service credited the shoes with both preserving the feet and carrying them ashore. The tough shoe soles and fabric shielded the flesh from being completely eaten or degraded, leaving the foot nicely packaged inside, while the air-filled components provided enough lift for ocean currents to carry them great distances. One veteran investigator mused that if the same drownings had happened a few decades earlier, when shoes were heavier, the feet might have stayed sunk, and none of this would have made the news. In fact, McClintock, the coroner, noted that sneaker technology improvements around the 2000s likely explain why feet suddenly began appearing after 2007, and not before. Quote, "Now they float, whereas before they just kinda stayed down there at the bottom of the ocean," she said, referring to the proliferation of ultra-buoyant soles in the 21st century. Oceanographic patterns further explain why the Salish Sea, in particular, became the stage for this drama. The Salish Sea, which includes the Strait of Georgia, Puget Sound, and Strait of Juan de Fuca, is a complex, semi-enclosed network of waterways with strong tidal currents and winds that tend to funnel floating debris into certain areas. Surface currents can carry a floating object, like a sneaker-bound foot, for miles, and often converge on shorelines of islands and narrow inlets. Once a floating foot hits the shore, it stays, waiting to be discovered. The cluster of finds around the Gulf Islands and Fraser River Delta suggests the outflow of the Fraser, the region's largest river, and the tidal gyres in the straits help deposit objects in those areas. Indeed, as investigators later noted, body parts routinely wash up in other parts of the world too, wherever the geology causes floating flotsam to accumulate. The Pacific Northwest's population and cold sea mean many drownings and also good preservation for remains. Kathy Taylor, a forensic anthropologist in Washington, pointed out that the Salish Sea is bounded by a metro region of over 8 million people, so statistically, there are many cases of people going missing in the water. Combine that with the coastal dynamics, and it's not so implausible that occasionally a sneaker-clad foot will drift to a beach. Forensic teams work to identify the feet whenever possible. DNA was the primary tool, though it was often degraded by saltwater. In cases where DNA was too damaged or had no match on file, they used footwear information and anthropology. Shoe size, brand, and manufacturing date help narrow possibilities. For instance, knowing a shoe model year told investigators the person likely went missing after that year. They cross-referenced missing persons reports by including shoe descriptions in those reports, something Taylor advocates as standard practice, assisting in matches being made when a foot surfaced. By late 2021, the British Columbia Coroner's Service announced that 15 feet found in British Columbia between 2007 and 2018 had been positively identified, all belonging to individuals who went missing prior. Most were men, some were women. Many were known or presumed to have died by suicide off of bridges or shorelines, or in accidents. In the U.S. cases, too, several identifications were made: a missing fisherman, a depressed man feared to have jumped, etc. With each ID, police quietly closed another chapter, satisfied that no murderer was on the loose. One veteran Canadian officer noted, somewhat poignantly, that behind each foot was a personal tragedy, a life lost in sad circumstances, rather than a crime scene. Quote, "It's very sad, but it's not a big mystery," said Gail Anderson in a recent interview, underscoring the consensus view among experts. However, in the early years before DNA results came in, the public had no such clarity. The bizarre nature of these discoveries, disembodied feet appearing out of nowhere, led to a flurry of urban legends, wild theories, and even hoaxes, all of which the scientists and police had to contend with. The factual answer may have been scientifically innocent, but that did not stop imaginations from running rampant. In 2008, as one foot after another kept turning up, the whodunit aspect of the mystery captivated people worldwide. If no one was certain yet that these were accidents, anything seemed possible. The atmosphere was ripe for conspiracy theories. Tipsters flooded police lines with outlandish suggestions. Quote, we get some very interesting tips. Serial killers or containers full of migrants sitting at the bottom of the ocean. Aliens had that one as well, said Laura Yazajan, a human identification specialist with the British Columbia Coroner's Service. Every time a new foot was found, she added, quote, "Pretty much every single time, a psychic will call and offer to help." Some of the more prominent theories and legends that swirled around the severed feet mystery were far more sensational and deadly. Starting off the theories and legends, a serial killer with a foot fetish. The notion of a deranged murderer chopping off victims' feet and tossing them into the ocean gained quick traction in the popular imagination. It has all the lurid appeal of a crime thriller, a sloppy serial killer at work, as one media outlet quipped. Online forums and YouTube videos posited that some unknown psychopath might be roaming the Pacific Northwest, disposing of bodies but oddly keeping only the feet to be found. However, as forensic evidence accumulated, this theory lost credibility. No signs of knife or saw marks were found on any bones. In fact, pathologists explicitly ruled out cutting. Quote, "These were not severed feet," Anderson stressed, meaning not manually severed. They were, quote, "disarticulated," or separated by natural forces. Moreover, the identified feet corresponded to unrelated missing persons over a span of years. Not a single common thread one would expect if a single serial killer were responsible. By now, officials have thoroughly debunked the serial killer idea as almost certainly not the cause. Another theory is victims of human trafficking or organized crime. Some speculated the feet could belong to victims of gang violence, perhaps bodies dumped at sea by drug cartels or human traffickers. There were whispers of the mafia's handiwork, e.g., executing people and weighting their bodies underwater, only to have feet break loose. One imaginative version had local gangs cutting off feet to avoid identification of corpses. But this runs into the same problem. No tool marks, no evidence of deliberate dismemberment. Law enforcement also found no pattern of crime victims among the identifications. No ties to trafficking rings emerged. It appears this theory was fueled more by general anxieties than any factual basis. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police stated flatly that none of the Canadian cases were linked to any criminal act. Another concept passed around was the idea of a missing plane or boating accident that was unreported. Early on, before identifications, a more plausible but ultimately coincidental theory emerged. Perhaps all these feet came from a single catastrophic event in the water. Attention turned to a 2005 plane crash near Quadra Island, not far north of where some of the feet were found. In that incident, a small twin otter seaplane carrying 5 men went down. 4 of the men's bodies were never recovered. Families of those victims, desperate for closure, wondered if the sea was finally giving up their loved ones' remains. In June of 2008, Kirsten Stevens, sister of one of the plane crash victims, rushed to the scene when a foot was found at Campbell River. Thinking it could be her brothers. Quote, "We are so frustrated. It's a constant reminder of the lack of closure," she told reporters. For a time, investigators did consider this possibility. However, as DNA identifications came in, none of the feet matched the profiles of the crash victims, nor the timing of their disappearance, except perhaps one older one from 1987, unrelated to the crash. Similarly, theories that a single large ferry sinking or boating accident had cast multiple victims adrift did not pan out. The feet were determined to come from different individuals, not one event. Nonetheless, this theory speaks to a truth. Bodies lost at sea, whether from a crash or a shipwreck, can surface years later, piece by piece, just not in one neat cluster, as imagined. Some hypothesized that the feet might not even be local. Could they have drifted across the Pacific from far-off tragedies? One idea was that they were victims of the 2004 Asian tsunami, carried over oceans by currents. Another suggested an earthquake-driven mass drowning somewhere. These were quickly deemed unlikely. Oceanographers pointed out that human remains would not stay intact over such vast distances, and time, plus the shoe brands and types, were mostly North American. Indeed, analysis of the shoes showed they were sold in local markets, in Canada and the US, within the last couple of decades, not old enough or geographically appropriate for tsunami victims from Asia. Thus, while flotsam like fishing debris can cross the Pacific, human feet in recent model sneakers were far more likely to originate from regional incidents. Inevitably, an eerie mystery will attract supernatural stories. Jokes about sea monsters or lake creatures biting off feet circulated, though humorously. Some invoked legends of vengeful spirits of the sea taking body parts. A few creative minds posited, quote, "Maybe it's a Sasquatch who doesn't like feet." These were never taken seriously, but they became part of the cultural chatter, reflecting how uncomfortable the public was with the mundane truth. Even officials like McClintock humorously referenced aliens in dismissing absurd theories. In short, the paranormal had no real foothold beyond adding color to an already unusually strange tale. Amid all this speculation, hoaxes and pranks unfortunately made an appearance as well, further muddying the waters. In June 2008, at the height of the media frenzy, when a sixth foot had just been reported, police were embarrassed and locals horrified to discover that one supposed foot was actually a hoax. On June 18, 2008, someone planted a skeletonized animal paw, likely from a dog or bear, inside a sock and shoe on a Vancouver Island beach. It had been stuffed with dried seaweed to appear convincing. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched an investigation to find the prankster, and Inspector Brendan Fitzpatrick vented his anger publicly. Quote, "Whoever is responsible for this took the time to ensure the remains were set up to closely resemble human remains. The insensitivity shown to the families and the victims involved is unbelievable." Indeed, many families with missing loved ones were following the news anxiously, wondering if one of the found feet might be their relative. This hoax cruelly toyed with those emotions. Another prank occurred after the 11th foot was found in August of 2011. Someone left several running shoes filled with raw meat on a beach in British Columbia, mimicking the discoveries. Police quickly determined those were not human and likely a sick joke. Such incidents, while isolated, add confusion and showed how the mystery had captured the dark side of public fascination. Throughout 2008 and 2009, the media sensationalism around the severed feet was running at full tilt, which only encouraged more wild theories and occasional copycats. It took consistent messaging from scientists and law enforcement over the years to finally quell the conspiracies. But for a time, the Salish Sea foot mystery felt like a real-life crime thriller unfolding in slow motion on the nightly news. From local newscasts to international headlines, the media played a pivotal role in shaping the severed feet saga. In the initial months, reporting was straightforward: a strange find on a beach, an investigation underway. But as the count of feet climbed, journalists and their audiences leaned into the macabre curiosity of the story. Sensational monikers like the mystery of the floating feet and British Columbia's 6 foot of separation blared from newspaper front pages. Each new discovery was greeted with a mix of alarm, morbid humor, and ghoulish excitement in the press. Canadian outlets wrestled with how to cover such a grisly topic without veering into tastelessness. The Vancouver Sun treated it as a serious mystery, their headline being "Mystery of the Feet," whereas the more tabloid Province newspaper ran the optimistic if bizarre headline, "Sixth Foot Raises Hope," implying that finding a matching foot might solve the case. The breathless coverage fed public intrigue. As one scientist observed, there is a morbid fascination with such subjects, and the media knows it. The story soon leapt across borders. The Guardian in the UK ran an incredulous piece about the baffling feat on Canada's coast, joking that even on a sunny day, a place named Savage Road yielded a severed foot. Newspapers in Australia and South Africa picked it up too. The alliterations and wordplay were often irresistible. One headline asked, "Why is it always feet?" Late-night TV took notice as well. David Letterman quizzed Canadian audience members about the phenomenon in a tongue-in-cheek segment, bringing the mystery into popular culture. This intense media spotlight had a feedback effect on the public. As forensic anthropologist Kathy Taylor noted, quote, "The reason it's becoming a phenomenon is it's gotten a lot of press. Now people are checking. Beachcombers started paying extra attention to any shoe on the shore, where previously they might not have been bothered. Indeed, after so many news stories, an unattached sneaker now prompted a call to police, resulting in more reports, including false alarms. In this way, media coverage may have actually increased the number of feet found, simply because citizens were on high alert." Taylor dryly remarked that the feet showing up had partly become a self-fulfilling prophecy of awareness. Quote, Now people are checking inside every shoe. The media also at times sensationalized and even mischaracterized the discoveries. The term severed feet itself, while catchy, is somewhat misleading. It implies cutting or a violent act. Authorities repeatedly clarified that the feet were not severed by tools, but detached naturally, and some outlets eventually adjusted language to disarticulated feet or simply mysterious feet instead. Still, severed feet remained the popular phrase that stuck in public discourse. Even we are using it as the commonly known description. Documentaries and podcasts later delved into the story. When it comes to documentaries and, of course, podcasts that have delved into the story, they often use spooky narration and eerie music, playing up the creepiness before delivering the, by comparison, mundane truth. In 2023, the Netflix docuseries Files of the Unexplained featured the case, with the episode title surely designed to hook viewers on the weirdness before explaining it away, calling it the floating feet of Salish Sea. One can argue the media initially inflamed fears. Some locals truly worried a killer might be at large, or that something fundamentally sinister was happening. Only after police and coroners held press conferences with clear findings, no foul play, likely accident victims, etc., did the coverage shift toward explaining the science. By December 2017, for example, when yet another foot was found on Gonzales Beach, news stories were quick to include the official line that, quote, "there is nothing sinister," and all cases so far were accidents. Outlets like Vox and National Geographic published detailed explainers to educate the public that this was more of an oceanographic oddity than an unsolved crime. In a way, the media had helped solve the public mystery by disseminating the scientific evidence as it emerged. At the same time, the severed feet acquired a cultural resonance thanks to the media attention. They showed up in trivia lists, were the subject of late-night jokes, and inspired crime fiction. One crime novel in Norway was reportedly influenced by the story. The phrase "severed feet in Vancouver" became a byword for a creepy unsolved mystery, even long after it had been largely solved by science. The media's role was thus double-edged. They amplified the intrigue with puns, speculation, and global attention, but also eventually amplified the resolution by broadcasting the experts' conclusions. It's a textbook case of how modern mysteries can go viral and take on a life of their own in the press, sometimes outpacing the facts on the ground. By the late 2010s, the official conclusion from law enforcement and scientists was unified and firm. No crime occurred. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the British Columbia Coroner's Service, and Washington state authorities all concurred that the severed feet were the results of suicides, accidents, and natural decomposition. Foul play was ruled out in every case examined. As Sergeant Pierre Chopra of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police summarized in one briefing, quote, "It's simply a matter of unfortunate coincidences compounded by ocean currents. We have no evidence pointing to any homicide." This encapsulates numerous statements made by officials over the years. The scientific rationale backing them up included all the elements discussed: the tendency of feet to disarticulate, the buoyancy of modern shoes, the identification of the individuals and their likely causes of death, and the lack of any forensic evidence of cutting or bondage. In essence, the authorities came to view the severed feet mystery as not a mystery at all, but a collection of unrelated personal tragedies that only appeared mysterious because of the quirky way the remains surfaced. Many independent journalists and investigators who studied the case have accepted this conclusion. The Vice News piece tellingly titled, "Floating Feet Mystery is More Boring Than You Think," put it bluntly. 10 out of the first 15 feet were linked to people who died accidentally or by suicide, and the remaining ones were paired up to just a couple of other individuals. Former coroner McClintock's quote to Canadian Press, "In every case there is an alternative, very reasonable explanation," has been borne out by the evidence. No cover-up or nefarious cover story seems to be at play. The transparency of releasing identifications and causes when known has bolstered public confidence that this really was a freak natural phenomenon. That said, are all questions fully settled? Not entirely. Some independent observers point to a few lingering mysteries that keep the story intriguing. For one, a handful of the found feet remain unidentified to this day, including, as of this recording, the second Botanical Beach foot of 2016 and the Gonzales Beach foot of 2023, among possibly one or two others. Without identities, we don't know those individuals' stories. It's presumed they too were lost at sea in accidents or suicides, but families haven't come forward, or perhaps the persons were never reported missing. This leaves small gaps where conspiracy-minded folks can still wonder, what if? Could one of them have been foul play? After all, just cleverly disguised by the ocean. Investigators say there's no evidence of that, but absence of evidence can't entirely quash speculation. Another subtle point: while science answered the how, feet detach and float, and who, many identified as missing persons, it doesn't always answer the why those people ended up in the water in the first place. For confirmed suicides, we have an answer. For some, it's an accident, like a fisherman who fell overboard in a storm, or the elderly Stanley Akumoto, who may have slipped. But a few cases might forever lack context. Only a foot was found, nothing of the rest, leaving cause of death technically undetermined. This uncertainty, however slim, leaves room for narratives beyond the official line, though none with any hard proof. Perhaps the biggest reason the story remains so unsettling and captivating is psychological and visceral. Even with a perfectly logical explanation, the imagery of random human feet washing up on idyllic beaches is deeply disturbing. It confronts us with mortality in a dismembered form, literally parts of people appearing without warning. That's not something easily forgotten or rationalized away. The cultural resonance of the severed feet comes from this jarring contrast: the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest versus the horror of human remains. the ordinary, everyday object of a shoe versus the extraordinary sight of a foot inside. It strikes a chord of morbid fascination, a reminder of the ocean's power, both to conceal and reveal. As one Reddit summary neatly put it, the severed feet serve as a haunting reminder of how the sea can erase whole persons, yet return a piece to shore, hinting at many untold stories. In British Columbia and Washington, the saga of the floating feet has even entered local folklore in a modern sense. Beachgoers swapping stories might recall where they were when they heard about the fifth foot, or joke darkly when they see an old shoe washed up. Better check if it's occupied. It's the kind of communal ghost story that lingers because it actually happened. Even now, every few years, when another lonely foot bobbles ashore, the headlines briefly return, and so do the shivers. Officials will patiently reiterate the likely truth, and the public will nod. But then, we'll share the news article with a friend, marveling that it's happened again. The severed feet mystery, solved or not, has cemented itself as a piece of Pacific Northwest lore. In the end, what began as a gruesome puzzle turned into a testament to the power of science to illuminate the unknown. Oceanography, forensic pathology, and DNA analysis collectively unraveled the enigma that had spooked so many. The severed feet washing up in British Columbia were not the work of a hidden serial killer or supernatural curse, but rather the coincidental outcome of tragic deaths and natural forces. This official explanation is thorough and satisfying to experts, and yet, to the public, the sense of mystery endures, perhaps because it speaks to our deeper fears of disappearing without a trace, of nature's indifference, of loved ones lost to the deep. Each foot that washed ashore carried a tale of life ended, but also offered a chance for closure. A paradox that is both sad and strangely compelling. As of today, most of those once anonymous feet have a name attached and a story known. But should you ever find yourself walking a misty beach in the Gulf Islands and spot a lone sneaker in the racked line, you'll likely feel a hesitation, a flutter of morbid curiosity, and recall the legend of the severed feet. You might poke it with a stick just to be sure, your mind racing with possibilities. In that unsettled moment, science and legend meet, and the chilling mystery of the Salish Sea lives on, lapping at the shoreline with each incoming tide. Terrifying and True is narrated by Enrique Couto. It's executive produced by Rob Fields and Bobbletopia.com, and produced by Dan Wilder, with original theme music by Ray Mattis. If you have a story you think we should cover on Terrifying and True, send us an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com. And if you want to support us for as little as $1 a month, go to weeklyspooky.com/join. Your support for as little as $1 a month keeps the show going. And speaking of, I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay a little bit more to hear their name at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Kate and Lulu, Jessica Fuller, Mike Eschewey, Jenny Green, Amber Hansford, Karen Wiemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much, and thank you for listening. We'll see you all right here next time on Terrifying and True.